Hello and welcome to Panelism. This is a podcast where we talk about comics and graphic novels we are reading. I am Todd A.
And I'm Taylor Trask.
Welcome, Taylor. This is sort of our second official episode as Panelism. Yeah. I can't get over the irony that we used to joke, like in our very, very first episodes, about what our name should be and how we joke. There was a running joke of we change the name every week. Yeah, and we really didn't really do that to the show.
No,
but we have now made another hard change, and so I keep thinking like I think we cursed ourselves.
It's not
two
as
and
bad
a half years ago.
No.
It's not bad. No. And it encapsulates so much more of what we are doing and want to do, and it will make so much sense.
I can't wait. And it definitely is. And the biggest change is that people will be able to find us a lot faster and cleaner and not have to ask, wait, which one are you guys? Like, that's never something you want to hear. Even if the name is good and somebody goes, yeah, like, you don't hear people going, yeah, I'm going to go to Target. Wait, which Target are you going to? The one down, it's just Target. And we're just paneling.
Yeah. Are you the Beatles with the 2 E's or the A? Yeah. So the other big change is in our format is that instead of doing 2 books in one episode, we're doing 2 smaller episodes.
Yeah.
Every week with 1 book each. So hopefully gives people like they know they can. This one is the perfect length for me to drive to work with, or walk on the treadmill with, or whatever. So this is we're just talking about a book that I'm talking about. So it's all up to me right now. It's all on my shoulders.
So much power, Todd. So much
I know. I had that was me realizing in the moment, like, oh, I could really tank this. I have read for us this week a Mockingbird, written by Chelsea Cain, with the art by, bear with me here, Jesus Christ, I mispronounced the easy name, Cart Murfer. It's Kate Niemczyk, I think. Kate Cart, Jesus Christ.
I love how like you're so concerned about the Niemczyk that you screwed up the Kate part of that.
I felt my eyes look back, like I hit the K and then I hit art in my notes and went K art. Our brains are weird.
To a stunning start. Well, hey, you know what? Though? There's a screw up in every episode. We got over it. We had yours,
out of the way.
Now we're in the clear. It's nothing but blue skies from this point on.
Smooth seas or whatever. Kate Niemczyk, I think, is how we're gonna say it. And Chelsea Cain is the writer. This is a Big 2 book. So I probably had a Big 2 book recently, but I can't really remember what I had. No, you had the last Big 2 book. You had talked about the Ultimates a couple of episodes ago. Wow. Okay, that's crazy. Anyway, so you know what? I'll just read the back cover. With a scientific mind and a lethal mastery of martial arts, Bobby Morse has always been one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s best agents, but now she's going solo. When someone close to her is murdered, Bobby discovers some strange goings-on in the peacekeeping organization's own medical and recovery network. But when Lance Hunter's undercover gig at the London Hellfire Club goes south, Mockingbird sets off, battle staves at the ready to save Hunter and the Queen of England. From helping out a teen-driven bonkers by her own new powers to doing a little dog sitting, Bobby shows she's a woman of many talents.
Okay,
basically,
S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm interested.
S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, sometime Avenger, once married to Hawkeye. This is firmly in the, like, to me, that sort of that second layer of the Marvel onion, where there's all the superheroes that have actual superpowers, and then you start finding out like, oh, they've told a lot of stories about the humans that work with those superheroes, in the various agencies. So I had always sort of not really, Mockingbird was like a bit player to me, and I got volume 1 because I knew there's this controversy that I'll get into a little bit, not even controversy, but just a bunch of people being jerks on the internet, right when this first trade paperback came out. And this sort of, there was this great idea of like, hey, everybody just buy it on this day and let's put it at number 1 on Amazon and teach these trolls, who's buying comics. And so I had done that, and it sat on my shelf, and I kept thinking like, how, I'll get to it. I didn't even know if it would be appropriate for our show, because it's like Big 2, and it's a side character. I didn't really know what I was in for. Turns out I could not have been more wrong. I so super enjoyed this book. It also the cover of the trade paperback was done by Joel Jones, whose art I really like, and I liked it. I love the art to it, but there's definitely there's like a spy movie kind of theme. There's Mockingbird, you know, with her stave. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would say it reminds me of Kingsman, like right out of the gate. You know how much I love that.
Exactly. Yeah, you can tell there's sort of some dudes in suits running that look like to be secret agents, a car crash and her fighting and some rockets launching, and it's very spy movie-esque, but over the top, you know. Mm-hmm. And I sort of had in my head like, I don't know. And it might give you the hint, even though I knew just from what I had heard about it that it was going to have very feminist themes in it. It almost looks like it's like, I don't know. It's not even really close to Cheesecake. I'll get into that too a little bit later, but it just had that feeling of like, okay, there's, is this going to be safely feminist and not, in a way that I like, and not, it's not going to lean too hard into the like, satire of something that ends up being sexist itself.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's a strange thing, but there's a comic that I won't mention because I know it's generally regarded as a satire, but it's almost like incredibly sexist itself. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I hear it talked about as a satire, I'm like, yeah, but it's all just cheesecakey, drawings of women. I don't. How is this a satire? Like, if you want to see that, then you're going to see it anyway. Mockingbird is not that. That's all I want to say.
Are you talking about The Dark Knight Strikes Again?
No. Oh. I'm not, but that's a hilarious pull.
I was just like, anything Frank Miller. Let me just think through, like, what are some of his most offensive?
Oh my God, but his are more racially offensive. So I'm going to get you even more excited about this book, which is there's a great I don't even want to try to figure it out, but there's a letter. I think it's at the end of the trade paperback, because there's there's so many goodies. I'll get to them too. But there's a letter from Chelsea Cain, the writer, and she talks about how she pitched her first arc to Marvel, and the person she was pitching it to goes, it's a puzzle box episode. So and she sort of didn't even know that term, but she'd written a puzzle box. So what happens is the first issue is like these crazy vignettes where that the theme with Bobby Morse is that S.H.I.E.L.D. has this protocol with her, which is anytime we buzz you on this like super secret communicator, no matter what you're doing, like seriously, middle of the night, middle of the mission, it doesn't matter. You have to drop what you're doing and come report to us. We have to do a medical checkup on you. And every time she does it, they're checking, it's like head to toe, all this blood work and all these tests, and then there's this battery of psychological tests, and also like meta psychological tests or whatever, parapsychology, sort of think of the Ghostbusters when Bill Murray's like looking at he has the shapes on the cards and trying to get the people to read their minds. So that all this kind of stuff, like they're testing to see if she has, telepathy, but they're also testing all her blood work and everything. And she doesn't know what's going on. She's getting more and more irritated by that, plus the fact that she's in the middle of these missions. So the first issue, she's, it opens up and she's in one outfit. Like she's in like an underwater, like undersea sort of like scuba outfit. And when she's walking into S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters to get tested. And then there'll be this thing that's like 5 days earlier, and it shows the waiting room of the medical office, like at S.H.I.E.L.D. And there's always some, funny jokes, like Hercules is always there and somehow he's always hurt. Like he's holding an ice pack on his head, or he's got his arm in a sling or something. And every time she's in a different outfit, and then it'll say, S.H.I.E.L.D. medical waiting room, 10 days earlier, 5 days later. And you're sort of like, you're mixed up on the time. Like, when did all this happen? But then and every time you can tell something's weird. She's always in a different outfit. She might have different weapons with her. She's getting increasingly irritated, of course. They're measuring her paranoia. So you can see it's like going off the charts. And one of the very cool graphic things about this is so much of this whole series of Mockingbird with as written by Chelsea and drawn by Cart, is like there are just visual jokes and great graphic design and stuff. So when she's having a medical test, for example, there might be a little, just sort of the graphic design of the paranoia chart, or you know, like I'm struggling to, as I flip through, to find one, but just anything that might be like, you know, there will be diagrams of the building that she's in or something, and just a little bit more than most big two comics have in them these days. Nice. Like there's a great throwback to sort of 70s comics where they show the secret base and they, as a cutaway, you know, and it's like the mountain, the side of the mountain's like cut off sort of James Bond style, and you can see all the secret layers in it, and they're all labeled, which was just a big thing in 70s and 80s comics.
And 70s and 80s toys too. Like they always portray like He-Man and G.I. Joe toys. You know, you look at the box and it does the same. I'm very familiar with that effect.
Totally. And it's so there's just all this like, you know, modern graphic design, and also just shout outs to stuff like that. So anytime, even when there's something quiet going on, like she's just sitting in a waiting room, you're kind of looking around the margins to find out where are all the jokes and stuff. You know, one time she shows up with a dog. So you don't really know where this is going. But what happens then is in the next 4 issues, I guess this is 1 through 5. She is then every issue explains what happened in those days before she had to report.
Okay.
So they're all individual missions, but because of that first issue, they're all tied together with this like larger theme. So as I read on the back about what's his name, Lance Hunter, who's a boyfriend of hers, who's just this hilarious like beefcake sort of, you know, it's like the real beefy handsome man who's constantly shirtless. You know, it's a total flip on the spy trope of, you know, the just beautiful women like kind of hanging around or whatever. And so he's a former lover of hers, and like when she goes to the London Hellfire Club to rescue him, he's tied up and he's being initiated, but it's a sadomasochistic ritual. And so he's being whipped, and, you know, she steps forward to administer some lashings or something. And then she ends up, you know, letting him go. And but there's, you know, I don't know. It's a great, like there's, you know, funny sexual roles that have been reversed, and, you know, just not in any pushy way, but like a definitely like empowering message. And
I mean,
you know,
I'm reminded of Chris Pine and Wonder Woman as you're saying that. Like it has sort of that same kind of feeling of like, oh, we're just going to flip the script a little bit, and in a way that's not like, that's just appropriate. You know, it's like, oh, it's about time, you know, the tables are turned.
It is definitely what I was so impressed by. And like I said, when I, you know, my impressions of the cover and stuff, and was, as I read it, what I was so impressed by was how well they walk that line where it's not even as like, it's even funnier than the Chris Pine role.
Oh, nice.
Or just in a different, you know, I mean, it's cheesier, it's cornier, you know, it's definitely played up for the, you know, Lance is in his like tight underwear all throughout the series, which is like a little British Union Jack flag, you know, and he's just in the jockeys. And anytime Hawkeye is shown, he's generally also naked, but for his boxer briefs, which are an American flag, you know, so that's how you can tell them apart, because they're both just beefcakes. There's a joke that kind of runs through here where she calls Lance, like she's in bed with Lance and she calls him Clint, and he's like, geez, you know, that's your ex-husband's name, you know. And she's like, yeah, okay, good night, Clint. And you know, like gives it to him again. And it just really walks that line well, where it is funny and willing to be corny and cheesy at times and go for some sort of obvious jokes, but package them all in this way that really is about like a strong woman who's not taking any shit from the men in her life. And it just all works really well. Like the tone is so balanced, which is why it's so funny that this was targeted, and she was, the writer was targeted with so much harassment by these like Comicsgate goons who think that this is some, you know, denunciation of men or something like that. Like it's so clearly playful, but with its heart in the right place. And like I said, the tone is just perfectly balanced. It's not strident, you know, it's not preaching. So it's just totally stupid that this got targeted with this stuff. So this volume 1 is this puzzle box, and I thought it was just so satisfying. Like every issue is a different adventure. You know, she ends up when she's in the sadomasochistic gear, gets in these secret tunnels in London, and you know, where they exit is actually in the Queen's bedroom. So
neat.
the Lance Hunter has to crawl out in his like leather jockey shorts, you know, and his collar on, like his, you know, S&M gear, and she's in her dominatrix gear. But then the Queen is so grateful for them, you know, saving the country, that she gifts them one of her corgis. And so now you understand like why she was in the waiting room in the first issue in dominatrix gear with a corgi with her, you know? So it's that kind of thing. Like you're putting these pieces of the puzzle back together from issue 1 as you're reading each subsequent issue. And they're not difficult to understand. You know, it's not like you're not on the hunt for something. This isn't like difficult Easter eggs. It's just enough of everything, you know? Yeah, so it's, but the overarching thing is that as she's, what you don't know, the mystery that's hidden from you is that she's putting together the pieces of why S.H.I.E.L.D. is testing her biologically and parapsychologically. So that too ends up being like, there's a couple things, I don't think this is a spoiler, but some powers manifest. Like she, you know, as they're testing her parapsychologically, she ends up being able to do some stuff.
Do they try to tie that? Because I know on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the TV show, they were trying pretty hard to get Adrianne Palicki she was cast as this character. And I think they were trying to set up a storyline where they were going to try to do a little bit more deliberate tying into Inhumans. Do you get the sense of that here, or does that spoil it too much?
I don't know that I wasn't aware of that. So I didn't know that it was tying into anything. I think there is sort of canon backstory. I'm not really sure how far back this goes.
Okay.
Whether it's canon backstory or just invented for this volume. Like I assume it's canon going forward, but basically they do say you were given a treatment of super soldier serum and some other serum because she had in canon been killed.
Okay.
And so there's this sort of, you know, backstory here, which is we gave you these, this volatile mixture of these two serums to bring you back from the brink of death. And we're not really sure what it did to your biology. That's why we have to test you all the time.
A little bit of Ghost in the Shell action.
Yeah. So when it starts to, when this power manifests, that's the mystery to the reader. Like
Nice.
That's what's so satisfying, I think, about this arc is that there's a really obvious visual thing that like anyone can put together. If you know, you don't have to be that careful of a reader. You can keep putting the things back in the puzzle box, putting the puzzle together, however that metaphor works, from the first issue. But there's deliberately a mystery held back from you that you're also discovering. Like she's, you know, Bobby is not telling you everything in her narration. So you're putting that together too. And that's where I just, you know, that I love too. Like it was a very cool mystery. It's not a goofy, it's not like a goofy superhero origin story of like, oh, and that's how they got this new power that they have or something, you know, it just worked for the arc. And when it's over, you kind of know, like it's over, you know, that's it. And, yes, now it's canon that she's had the super soldier serum and whatever, but the powers mystery is kind of solved and over, and it's not going to go on past that, which I thought was really great. So this book was canceled after 8 issues. It was actually canceled, I think, much earlier, like maybe even on like 4 or 5, like within the first arc.
So let's be clear, let's kind of clarify that. It was meant to run a lot longer, or was 8 issues kind of the original order? And they're like, hey, create, and like, because with American comics and especially Big 2, you always have to wonder, like, what was was this meant to be over at a certain point, or was this like, you know, volume 1 of 35 that we have planned if this is successful?
Well, and it's hard to say whether it was planned, you know, like if they, sorry. It's hard to say if it was planned, like if they, not that, just that they had planned out 35 issues, for example. I think they had definitely written more issues than they had. It was not meant to be a mini series.
Okay.
It was one of those where, you know, the Big 2 will often do a title that's like a minor character. They'll give them a solo title, and you get the impression like that it's going to it's just going to run for a while, but it's also sort of an experiment and seeing if there's an audience for this character. So this is where I think the story is going to get to where you're like, hopefully I'm going to intrigue you. Like I know my audience and you're going to love this next part. So it's canceled after 8 issues. But what I wanted to say was I went ahead and got volume 2 of this, and so what it ends up having is they must have known the cancellation was coming. And in volume 2, it is 3 issues of the Mocking, like it's the next 3 issues. Volume 1 is 1 through 5. Volume 2 is 6, 7, 8. And then there's 2 issues of the New Avengers that Mockingbird is in.
Okay.
That were not done by the same creative team.
Whoa.
So those first 3 issues, like 6, 7, 8 of volume 2, are a mini story or just an arc in its own, like a mini arc. You know, an arc is usually 5 or 6 issues. This is just 3, but it is just a pure detective story. Like it's that thing of, a detective has been given a strange invitation that they know to be suspicious and they should not actually accept. In this case, she accepts an invitation to take a cruise the weekend that Hawkeye is on trial for murdering Bruce Banner, which is like a Civil War II theme or something. So she's given a mystery to solve, like on this cruise ship, and she's taking it as like, I need to distract myself from Hawkeye's trial. But it's also related to Hawkeye's trial because she's being given information by this person that's you can't really tell is either a supporter of Hawkeye or, wants him dead because he killed Bruce Banner. And, there's like a vigil for the Hulk on board the ship. And it's also like, there's all this cosplay on the ship. And there are also these many running in jokes, like Paul and Storm are on the ship. And I don't know exactly who they are. Are they a musical duo or like they're a real life thing? Anyway.
Captain and Tennille, here they are.
Yeah. And sorry, Paul and Storm. But like John Roderick is on, like famous podcast and musician, podcaster and musician. So like at first they're thrown in and you're like, oh, that's funny. Like the same graphic sort of playfulness. There's like the cruise itinerary every morning of like, today on the cruise ship, here are the activities, on the Lido deck, we're doing this. And John Roderick will be hosting whatever. And you're like, oh, that's funny. And then it turns out like they're all characters later.
Oh, Nate.
Like she brings them all into the, the lineup, the gallery of like the rogues gallery of who could have done it. So it's a cool mystery and it's told with the same kind of humor and everything. But there's definitely this sense of like, this was interrupted. And then it is so obvious, like I mentioned about the worry that this would be sort of wrapped in some cheesecake art or something early on. When I opened up New Avengers, the very first episode, it was so clear how cheesecakey normal superhero art is. Like there's just a couple of angles of female superheroes in that where you're like, oh man, they just drew this to focus on her butt, or her boobs or something. And after reading 8 issues of Mockingbird, where you're like, it looks cartoony and there's some beefcake stuff, but I think it's played with the right tone. It was just obvious like what the difference between a good art is and then like the male gaze of like cheesecake art that they know they can get away with. And I honestly, I was reading the New Avengers issue and then started doing that thing where I'm moving like faster through it and just kind of scrolling. It was digital. And then I just put it down. I was like, I don't care. It just doesn't suit this after you've read Mockingbird, which was just so funnily feminist. It ends with her in bed with both Clint and what's his name? I keep forgetting his Lance. I keep wanting to call him Logan. Lance Hunter and Clint and her. And she's like, it's that thing where it's like kind of, it keeps moving out one step of every panel, where they're in the same room. And then you see like there's a close up on her feet and she's like, rub my feet, boys. And then it's like, then the next panel is like outside the chalet that they're in or whatever. So you see like the window and then she's like, harder, Clint, and then it's kind of back one more thing. And it's, as sort of the camera is withdrawing and all is that she's in a house with both of her former lovers.
That's amazing.
And she's making them take care of her because she has rescued both of them essentially,
I mean, who honestly looks at that as anything but just funny, welcome. It's like it's a welcome twist. Like who looks at that and goes, "Oh, my masculinity is like this is awful." Like who? I mean, and also I don't understand. Like
it's also a twist that's not like it's not sexist in reverse. So I don't even think you can play that card at it because it's just so obvious once you flip over the next page into the New Avengers. And you see that they've deliberately drawn, like, I can't even remember who it was, if it's Mockingbird or it's, a Black Widow or somebody, they've deliberately drawn her from this angle that like is focused on her breast from the side. God. And it's like, but even when they were, in the Mockingbird, these sort of like this feminist tale, when they have those playful things of Clint and Lance, it's not shown like where his like penis bulge is like, it's not drawn in that way where it's like literally objectifying him.
Yeah.
And so it's exactly what it's kind of like you asked, like when we talked about Chaotic Good a couple episodes ago, like how do people actually get mad about this stuff? So
let me throw a quick counterpoint in, and I say this only because I just last night watched that excellent He-Man documentary on Netflix that was a kind of an expanded version of that Toys We Love episode. So in that documentary, they get into the launch of She-Ra. And it's a really important part of the piece because what I had forgotten a little bit, but I was like, as they were describing, I'm like, oh my God, this was me too. She-Ra, the stories and the animation were actually better than the original He-Man cartoon because at that point, that team had just gotten really good at doing what they're doing. Yeah. And so the stories were always a little more sophisticated. And I remember at the time, both as a kid watching it, but then even, you talk to your friends and even now, everybody's quick to say, oh, I was a huge hardcore He-Man fan, but I actually liked the She-Ra cartoon better because the stories were deeper, a little bit more sophisticated, like everything. And there was nothing at all wrong with liking She-Ra as much, if not more, because it's like, oh shoot, this is just taking what I loved and making it even better. Because He-Man was still involved, but it's like a lot of times, like what She-Ra was fighting against was a little bit more important. And there was never, ever this idea of, well, there was no protest of like, what message are we sending to little boys if we have a girl?
Right.
Like that was never the case. Never once.
Yeah.
And it's even to the point now, and this is a really bizarre sort of twist, where Netflix is doing a She-Ra cartoon reboot, and a lot of people are mad about it because it looks really cheap. And it does not give the character the sort of importance that I think, and a lot of men are leading that charge going, no, we want this, but we want it to be serious like Voltron and not like whatever this is. And there's this kind of weird, like it's almost in the reverse where like a lot of men, in their 30s and 40s who were kids at, during He-Man are like, hey, I would love a She-Ra cartoon that treats this shit like as seriously as it did back then, only just, with 2018 in mind. All that to be said, it's odd that there's an entire generation of men who grew up with that going, oh, this is how who respected a female character launching off of and becoming somewhat more successful than the original thing. And yet we have this situation with Mockingbird where it's like, really? Still? Like this is, how can this be a thing? I'm so baffled by that.
And see, at the time I was like, I didn't really hear the noise before Chelsea Cain left Twitter. So she left Twitter. They kind of helpfully point out in an article I'm going to mention, like 3 weeks, I think, before the election of 2016.
Oh, geez.
And there was this big deal about, remember that shirt? Jesus Christ, I can't talk today. The shirt I wore when we did our little photo session that says, ask me about my feminist agenda.
Yeah.
So there's a Mockingbird issue where she's wearing that shirt very famously. This is when the troll attacks on her hit peak level, is because Mockingbird is in that t-shirt that says, ask me about my feminist agenda.
Oh, neat.
And that's why I got that shirt at the time. And that was sort of the apex of the criticism when that single issue came out, but they already knew the series was canceled and she just got off Twitter. And so this is where I think the story, why I picked this at this moment and why I think you're going to dig it even more is that this so Chelsea Cain and a different creative, like a different art team, but they were working on a Vision series to follow the Tom King series that we read and discussed on this podcast. And it was canceled by Marvel before it was ever published, and they'd only done 4 issues.
What?
And it was going to be focused on Vision and his daughter. And the same team was writing it, and I was like, this sounds so awesome. So it's one of those weird things where it's like, that, you know, their reasoning may have been kind of flawed for why they canceled it. They may have canceled it because pre-sales weren't that great, but we all know that the pre-sale scheme is like, it's such a dumb way to measure that, because unless you're a hardcore fan, you don't go in and say, please pre-order this copy for me. Like, that's how you have to show, you know, so the only people who are ever going to be excited about a title before it launches are super hardcore fans who are reading the news that it will even know that it might be launching.
Yeah.
And I'm taking it from your reaction. You didn't know it was launching. I didn't know it was launching.
No.
We're in a comic book store every week. We're just not reading that news because we're more, you know, even though we're interested in this Marvel title, we're more focused on, you know, independent non-big 2 publishers.
Yeah, but even if I knew it was coming out, my first question, I'd be like, well, why are they doing it? Who's behind it? Like, because that Vision series was so compact, wonderful as it was, I'd be like, okay, well, if they're going to do a sequel, I really got to know the details as to what's like. You're going to
wait till an issue or 2 comes out, and you're going to go through those and then decide whether to buy in or not.
Exactly.
So they cancel it, and then Chelsea Kane, it's just sort of like brushed under the rug. And it's not like they canceled it because she's feminist or whatever. It's like they just canceled it because that's the big 2 system, you know. And so she tweets last week, you know what I just realized? I think that Marvel thought I would be quiet about this whole killed Vision comic thing because I was quiet after Mockingbird was canceled. Let me clarify. I was quiet then because I was scared, not of you, Marvel, of the internet. I'm not scared of either of you anymore. So she just came out and said, Marvel killed this. You didn't even know about this book. Here's what's going on behind the scenes. Like, there's no transparency into this process. So that's why the corporations get to keep, like, the old boys club persists because we don't have any like view into it, you know? So you can't even judge it as, like, you can't even say it was canceled because it had feminist themes, or it was canceled for a legitimate like sales reason, or because they're taking the characters in a different direction. You don't even know because there's no transparency to it. They just assume that their creators will keep quiet when this happens by dangling the carrot of, we'll give you another series later. And there's just no real promise. Like, so she comes out and says, I'm a successful author. Like, she's a novelist.
Yeah.
She came to comics from that. So this doesn't damage her income and like her future employment, you know, or employability. So she decided to speak up this week about, you know, for freelancers. Because she was like, freelancers who go, you know, 4 books into something thinking they're going to have income for the next 2 years, and then it gets canceled. They're encouraged not to speak about that project getting canceled because they think, well, then I damage my chances of getting a bigger, or not even bigger, but just any work from Marvel in the future. So I definitely think if you're interested in all this, go to the Daily Beast and just search for I'm Dead to Marvel, because that is the title of this article. It's Chelsea Kane, I'm Dead to Marvel, trust me. And then the second thing that made this Mockingbird like a really timely pick this week was that her new book with the same creative team from Mockingbird is being published by Image, and it is called Man-Eaters. It is about a world where this gets even better, where when little girls get their period, they become like werecats, where they are able to transform into man-eating giant cats.
It's almost like she heard the criticism, you know, the ill-warranted criticism for Mockingbird. I was like, all right, fine. If that's what you want, that's what you think this is, then I'm just going to make literally that.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Here
exactly what it is. You think this is about women eating men? Fine. So yeah, they're calling it part cat people, part Handmaid's Tale.
Oh my God.
Issue number 1 just came out. My comic book shop. I was so hoping to read this week to talk about it on the show, even though I've run really long. But my comic book shop sold out like immediately. So they had a special order one for me. So you may face the same thing, but yeah, that's where I wanted to wrap it up.
Damn.
I think, when we're talking about like, if you liked a different, I want to make a really weird association here, which is if you like Archer, I think you will like Mockingbird.
Ooh, that's a great reference point.
Same feeling of satirizing the spy tropes, even though Archer goes like way heavy, like, like they just amp up the sexism, the chauvinistic sexism, and this one kind of goes the opposite way and puts a woman in charge. But basically, like if Lana were, if Archer were the series Lana, this might be it.
I love that.
But just so many inside jokes and stuff, and also I wanted to mention Chew, which is really left turn kind of thing. But Chew just did a great thing where there were tons of Easter eggs. Like you really had to scan the margins of every panel to see all the jokes they were making, and I think that's something that's really important in Mockingbird. I would say I didn't really enjoy volume 2. So volume 1, sorry, I'm going to take a question away from you here, Taylor, but volume 1 I got physically and really enjoyed it in that physical form. I think you could enjoy it digitally. I got volume 2 digitally, and I'm glad I did, because those 2 New Avengers issues I'm just never going to read them. So I would hate to have this big paperback sitting on my shelf that half of I'm not going to read.
Yeah.
And even though that little mystery story on the cruise ship is just as fun and everything, it doesn't have that sort of satisfying puzzle box feeling to it. So I think volume 1, you're going to like, you can feel if you read volume 1, like, what, this was the wrap up. And there's a sort of epilogue that takes place with this short story they did later, but it's not, this one felt like volume 1 feels like I'm satisfied with this. It's all here. So that's Mockingbird by Chelsea Cain and Kate Niemczyk. Marvel 2016. Get it.
Well, it's certainly on my pull list now, and I can't wait to. I was thinking Kingsman, but I think Archer is a much more apropos comparison.
Well, actually, of course, I go to Archer, you go to Kingsman, but I think Kingsman might be really, really good too, because it does have that. There's the cheeky sense of humor. That's what I meant, not like corny or whatever I said, or cheesy. It's cheeky, and so I think there's that cheeky sense of humor. But plenty of action and everything like that. So it's I would say Kingsman is definitely a good reference. And I would also say if you want the artifact, get the physical for sure. But there's probably nothing wrong with reading volume 1 digitally, like, because it is a big 2, the guided view is probably going to work great. And it did for me for volume 2. I just it just worked out the way it worked out. I'm glad I don't have both as paperbacks.
Awesome. Well, another great book is in the can. Go and grab that on New Comics Day this week or whenever you're listening. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are found. Just search for Panelism, and you'll get us. Not Coffee and Comics Club anymore. I think we're going to change the name there. So Panelism's everywhere. We're on Stitcher, Google Play, Pocket Casts. I think Spotify soon, hopefully. I already talked about that. And then you can also find all our shows at findusthere.org. Subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell us what you think. If there's a book you want to hear us review, let us know. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I am by Taylor Trask.
And I am Hey Todd A on those places. But yeah, tell us what you want to hear us do.
Fantastic. Well, it's another great Panelism episode, Todd. I'll see you next week.
Excellent.